Yeah, not yet. She asked for more comments. It's like, Sam Parker made a comment. You made another comment, right? Yeah, just for that. Yeah. So, well, I'll keep meeting on it. But I was going to say that the yes. That's right. That's right. Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, everyone, so we'll be starting real soon, and wow, this is a loud mic. So last time we did this, we were in a really small little room, and that worked out nicely because everybody could sort of interact and stuff. So if you're just walking in and looking for a place to sit, please come and sit near the front. And of course, you can even hold my hand. We'll start in like 2 minutes because people are still wandering in, like some late people like Jared. It's over there. So, hello everyone, this is the Captive Portal buff. We're currently calling it CAPPORT. Some people don't like the name. If you can come up with another set of words that make the CAPPORT acronym, that would be cool, and maybe we'll rename it. Otherwise, we're sticking with CAPPORT for now. I'm Warren, this is Mark. Do we have somebody who is willing to JavaScribe? Anyone? Thank you. Who's that? Oh, Wes. Thank you. Wes will JavaScribe, which of course leaves the other job of who will be willing to take minutes. There is an Etherpad URL in the agenda. Where's the agenda? I can't easily bring up the agenda page. Yeah, there is an Ether. I'll try and find it. Except that it's really slow. Well, is going to take a while, isn't it? Agenda would be better. Yeah, that'll work. Agenda. So we have an Etherpad link over there. Hopefully it's actually legible to people. We still, however, need somebody who is willing to actually be in charge and type stuff into the Etherpad, hopefully with others as well.
And yeah, that makes it easier. It should be more attractive because it's collaborative.
I noticed that Sean Turner is looking at his laptop and is not looking up and is trying to ignore us.
You have been chosen.
Thanks, Sean. And everybody, of course, please help Sean because we've all seen his typing. Why is this not going full screen? Sorry. Okay, so the blue sheets are circulating. Please fill in the blue sheets. This is the IETF note well. By now you should have seen it, hopefully many times. Please make sure that you understand what it means and what its implications for you are. If you do not understand this, please speak to legal counsel and make sure that you know what's going on. So, how many people here were at the captive portal bar buff that we had last time?
In Dallas.
In Dallas. How many people here know what a captive portal is? Or, great. Is there anybody who does not know what a captive portal is? Okay.
Let's explain it to Ecker.
Okay. Yeah, we're not believing you.
But before you do that, the Etherpad scribe needs to figure out how to find the Etherpad.
It's in the agenda. And the agenda is on the IETF website.
And I think he knows how to find the IETF website, but if not, someone please help Sean.
Is there a captive portal in front of the IETF website?
Etherpad's not working? Jim, fix the internet for Jared. Okay. Well, sorry. So.
Oh, Patrick is scribing too. Thank you.
So sometimes these captive portal things actually work nicely. On my flight here, I was on a United flight, and it had a captive portal, and it actually worked. And when that worked, you know, it was actually really nice. It was fairly seamless. I tried to go to IETF.org. They intercepted my connection and brought up this page, which let me pay. They took all of my money, and then I got actually fairly bad internet access. But the experience wasn't too bad in general. Usually, though, it doesn't. This was in Schiphol Airport. I really needed to figure out where they had moved my gate to. And after a long time, this was all I could manage to get. After many other poking at things, I managed to get this. It appears that they localized me and decided that I spoke Latin. Unfortunately, I don't speak Latin. You do? Oh, well, maybe they thought I was Mark.
4 long years.
And so this was a ungood user experience. Often, when they don't work, it makes other things sad. Presumably, everybody who runs a Mac has seen the sort of iTunes cannot connect to the iTunes store. Would you like to trust the certificate? Other things like that. This apparently, it decided to intercept all IP traffic and reply with HTTP answers to anything. This did not work out well. So why do we have these problems? Well, the captive portal needs to actually talk to a user. This means that they need the user to connect to them in some way. And in order to do that, at the moment, they need to intercept your connection. Almost all of these look like man-in-the-middle attacks, largely because they are basically man-in-the-middle attacks, maybe just without the sort of malicious intent. These involve things like, DNS hijacks or sort of HTTP interception, things like that. IP interception. They look like man-in-the-middle attacks. They're basically indistinguishable. We've recently been spending a lot of time and effort trying to make man-in-the-middle attacks harder or fail. This involves things like VPNs, ubiquitous encryption, DNSSEC, possibly one day things like deprive as well. All of these make the captive portal interception problem much harder for the captive portal people. But even once they've managed to actually intercept the connection, it seems that often interacting with the captive portal doesn't work all that well. Often, this pops up on your phone. The display doesn't really work very well because it's a much larger sort of screen that's being expected. Often internationalization doesn't really work very well. Often accessibility doesn't really work very well. Many people sort of have don't have a real web browser that they talk to, sort of a braille reader, things like that. Those really don't work very well with the sort of captive portal interaction. But anyway, after a while, you get through the page, you enter your credit card information, or you just accept the acceptable use policy page, and then everything works really nicely for 3 hours or 12 hours or however long you have purchased. And then everything stops. Largely because, they need to do the interception again, everything you've had working, your VPN stops, things like that. Also, often you don't know if you've actually managed to satisfy the captive portal or that there is a captive portal. So here's a long litany of things that don't work. So what would we actually like? Personally, I would like that when I arrive somewhere, like a hotel, and I open my laptop, I get some sort of interface that I can easily interact with the device. All of my applications don't go off in the background and try and initiate connections and then fail. I would like it that an application that starts up and calls, for example, get host by name at the very beginning doesn't then end up with a corrupt sort of entry of what the IP is until I restart the app. I would like this to be a good user experience, something nice and seamless. So what do I think we would like to do? There's all of the interception stuff, a way for captive portals or for machines to be able to detect that they're behind a captive portal. A lot of things do various probing. Some people have tried to defeat the probing for various reasons. We'd like a way for the captive portal or the network or something to be able to say, by the way, you're behind a captive portal. Do not try and initiate new connections. Do not try and go anywhere until you have satisfied me. We would also then like, I think, a way for us to actually interact with the captive portal. Possibly if you have something like a phone, a way, and this would be if the captive portal operator decides that this is attractive to them, a way for your phone or your device to be able to say, you're behind a captive portal, a standard UI that says you could choose this much time, or Eric, you have a...
Eric Klein, I was wondering if I could insert an adverb. Protocol to interact securely with the CP.
Yes, thank you.
Because this will inevitably involve putting in a credit card somewhere, right?
Yeah, yes, to interact securely with the CP. So, possibly some way that your device can actually know how much you need to pay or what you need to do in order to satisfy the captive portal. Then some way for you to figure out what the status is. It would be nice if your device could say, you purchased 12 hours of internet access, you only have 5 minutes left, would you like to pay more and get an additional thing? Not have, everything grind to a halt. Possibly, but this is sort of a longer term goal, a way for fully automated way for a device to connect. So if it's sort of a device that doesn't have a screen, sort of Internet of Things, new buzzword, a way for it to be able to interact with the captive portal with no human intervention. Possibly also something where if we had a secure way to be able to talk to these things, and it was on a mobile device, maybe, if it's your iPhone, it could use Apple Pay, or an Android device, maybe sort of Google Wallet, so you don't need to enter all of your credit card info. And Wes?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
One of the things I didn't hear you mention, and
not sure whether we're going to get to it later or whatever, is when you're bringing up a connection, you wake your laptop back up and you're connecting to an open wireless access point. My preferred behavior is hurry up and get the VPN up and functional as soon as humanly possible to avoid stuff in the clear for any longer than is absolutely necessary. What I think would be the smarter thing to do here would be to say, while you're in that waiting period, it might be that this could be used as a framework to tell the OS, don't talk to anything until we've got the VPN stood up.
Yes. Yeah. A sort of sandboxed, quiesced network state until you've made it happy.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Aaron Falk. Just sort of picking up on the secure point that I'd hate to see an outcome that allowed some third party to claim it was a captive portal and collect my credit card information and have me just wait until it said everything was okay.
Yes. Yep. That's a tricky one, but yes.
Petr Špaček, I have a point to the previous comment. Fedora 23 is going to do exactly that. Don't tell applications that you are connected until you dismiss the captive portal. And helping hands, welcome. Go to Fedora Devel mailing list.
Mike Bishop, Microsoft. I'll comment that a lot of people have done a lot of work in this space with not always great success. We have an HTTP status code that says you need to pay first. I don't think we have anything in TLS where they can actually interrupt your TLS session rather than just not letting you through or presenting the wrong cert. On the Wi-Fi Alliance front, there's Hotspot 2, where you have the automated login and you never see a captive portal if you already have creds, and Hotspot 2 Release 2 actually gives you a good purchase flow in theory, although I have not seen an actual implementation of Release 2 in practice. I think all the major OSs have their Discover the Captive portal, and we have telemetry saying there are all sorts of hotspots that pinhole the Windows, Apple, and Google probe URLs and nothing else, so that we all think we're on the internet. And yeah.
So one of the things that we're hoping is that we can make this attractive enough. If the interaction was simple enough that people were more likely to actually pay for their internet access. That it would be sort of a one-click button and maybe people would do it, which would remove some of the reason it seems that people are just sort of allowing the.
Well, I have to interject there. I don't believe in hope-based standards efforts.
Yeah. And so I think along those lines, we've come up with solutions for a lot of these, and the captive portal vendors have not deployed them. And so I think what we need to understand first is what is their motivation for not using the things that exist? Why is the current broken state better than anything anyone has proposed in their eyes?
Right.
And we may not have the people in the room to answer that.
Right. And I have to say I violently agree with Mike. We looked at this in a various number of ways in the HTTP working group, and I posted a link to a wiki page we collected information that has a lot of the different, not all, but some of the different aspects of why this is not a simple problem. We also looked at some of the W3C tags, same thing, and where I'm coming to, I was talking about hope. I was hoping that after we had a fairly positive barb-off in Dallas, that people would go away and bring the right people in the room so that we could actually have a productive effort here. And so for me personally, the number one question is do we have the right people in the room to do useful work?
Tim Chan. I wasn't at the previous barb-off, so I may be repeating what I said before. In the university world, of course, we use EduRoam and 82.1x, and I was one of the people that started that. What worries me here is that the captive portal, for all its sins, is something that's simple. Are we in danger here of essentially doing 82.1x light in some form of by going through and developing this further?
I did it again. Personally, I feel like there is a place for a standard because there's such variance in how individual captive portals in hotels and airports and places work. And while we have Hotspot 2.0 and other things, they tend to be more for very large-scale federated, not at the scale of my corner coffee shop where I live. And so I think there's a hole in the market. But again, if we're just a bunch of people who dislike how captive portals work now, and we don't have any way to influence implementations, well, we can talk to the cows come home. Okay.
Alex Roscoe, Comcast. Just answering one of the questions on, why are so many experiences broken? I think it would help if we could work with some of the vendors on getting them to get the development tools so we can, like the Apple Captive Portal Network Assistant, actually get tools that we can actually fire up web pages right on our desktop without having to actually connect to the AP, see the 302 and be in a captive state. So yeah, I think if we could get them to open up maybe documentation on how to design for it, because sometimes I remember in early releases like JavaScript was disabled, cookies are disabled, obviously for security stuff. But I think if we can get some cooperation there, I think it would help us develop better stuff.
And yeah, I think some of this also might just be a place where people get together and talk, not necessarily just getting the document done, but hopefully captive portal operators and vendors and maybe people who end up deploying these, etc., can also sort of have those sorts of discussions. But now
Yeah. So I'll scroll at two things. So first, I was particularly struck by what Mike just said about how, the operating systems have mechanisms for testing captive portals, and the captive portal manufacturers explicitly disabled those. There's really no. It's one thing to say that we got to get them to do something, but we got to get them to change their code. But if they're actually changing their code to avoid us detecting them, then there's really not much room for forward progress. No matter how cool standard is. So I guess I want to echo Mark's question and actually ask Mark to ask that question.
I'm going to be asking some questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
because I see a lot of the usual suspects in this room, of people I see IETF all the time.
Should we just ask some questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe because this could be a short talk. We don't know yet.
Well, yeah, that's kind of I have other buffs to go to if we're not going to have anything relevant to say.
Ecker, international man of mystery. Yes. So, should I ask some questions just to get a sense of who's in the room?
Sure. Okay. So, one of the things I should mention is we were supposed to get a hold of a lot more captive portal people and ask them to show up, which we failed at. Should. Well, it's not completely partial. Sure.
So, I would just put a pause on the mic lines just for a second, and we'll come back. Who thinks that there is a problem in this space where the current experience of captive portals on the internet is not optimal? Yeah. Okay. Good. Who thinks that they have some ideas on how to improve things? Fair number of people. Who actually works on a product that implements a captive portal? Okay, hey, actually we're not just work at a company that has a captive portal. I mean, you're on the team that has some ownership of the captive portal product. Hands nice and high, please. Real high. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I know it's okay. There's no stigma. Yeah. Thank you for coming.
So I have a proxy vote from someone as well.
Okay, fine. So let's say on the order of 10-ish people. We want to ask you questions in a friendly, non-confrontational way. If you don't want to state your name at the mic, that's totally cool. So about 10-ish. Who here works on an implementation that attempts to handle a captive portal, i.e. in an operating system? And I don't mean you work at one of those companies. I mean you work on that code. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let's call it, on the order of 10 and 10. That's actually better than we thought. Yay us. Okay. So Ecker, is that any other permutations that are interesting? Well, and honestly, if the outcome of this is that we give those vendors, on both sides a protected room to go away and talk amongst each other, document what they currently do and figure out, what next steps might be, that's an incredibly positive thing. I would much rather do that than have a lot of uninformed people throw ideas at them and chase them out of the room. So that's really interesting information. Should we go back to the mic lines?
Okay. Stefan Winter, an Eduroam person. You said earlier that captive portals are indistinguishable from MIDM attacks, and now you're making captive portals really smooth and easy. So are you making minimum attacks really smooth and easy?
That's the plan. That was a joke.
Sanjay Mishra, Verizon. So just wanted to say that I think the issues we have is we've got airports all over the world that offer their own captive portal, and you have chains of restaurants and Starbucks and everybody. So I think standardization, of course, makes sense, right? But I think the challenges that Mark you just said. So really, I was just trying to say is that is there a way that we can drive some sort of incentive for all these? That's where this direction, one of the at least directions. If that it goes in that direction, I think then we have some hope that this will actually see a day in light.
So can I interrupt and quickly get through this one little slide, and then so I've spoken to a number of people who run captive portals and asked them, why do you do things like create pinhole for the Apple captive portal test and apparently a fair bit of it is eyeballs are important. They would like to be able to display ads in a full-featured browser. They would like to be able to have people interact. In many cases, the way you get access is you do things like log on to Facebook and like them. That is going sort of overcoming that is going to be one of the issues with incentives in order to get people to deploy it.
This is the captive portal login page at a restaurant in Prague I went to the other night. It's Facebook. They want you to like them on Facebook to get the captive portal.
So what we're hoping is we'll be able to create enough incentive by making the user experience seamless that people will actually complete the captive portal thing, will actually pay them their $1 or whatever to get internet access, that is more valuable than the eyeballs. This might be a mistake. That might not work. Might be worth a try. And Eric is.
Yeah, Eric Klein. So I wanted to say that to 2 or 3 points made earlier, I think in the same vein that even if we don't get a standard for captive portal behavior or changes to captive portal behavior, some documentation of what the operating system people do and how they do it and recommendations for handling this sort of thing could be useful. Android has some things that are handy in this regard. An application can report that it's having an internet problem and cause a connectivity check to be performed again, for example. Maybe documenting some of that stuff would itself be of value, even if nothing else comes out of it.
Juan Carlos, yes, actually, I want to take it a little further. I think the fact that we saw raising hands, it's very interesting, and seems to me that something that we need is to educate each other, because we have very strong views on why we want it, and you just gave a few examples, but and we keep thinking about the Wi-Fi paying use case or the restaurant, but there's some cases where there's a policy where you have to comply to just getting the network, or there's you are in a company and you are a visitor and you have to say that you will abide by ABCD, and there's no payment. It's just that you have to sign so that you can get in. And I think that it'll be very useful to have those use cases documented, and same way some proposed answer to those use cases to people that have issues, then have both sides read each other, and it's like, oh, so it seems like, oh, and then I think that would be a good set of documents to start. I don't think that maybe we don't have to make it in the same document, maybe 2 sets of documents or whatever, but the fact that we can educate each other, I think will be very helpful to just go the next step and say, is there a standardized way to solve all of these issues?
And personally, I agree with that we started that wiki, and if we can find a way to continue, use cases and problems encountered, then that's maybe a way to move the conversation forward.
Dave Taylor. So speaking as, I guess, one of the people associated with one of the operating system side implementations, both historically and working with people who continue to own it now closely. Mike is another one. It occurs to me that I see this as being very similar to a different story that I'm going to summarize that I hope you'll see the relationship to. Once upon a time, the IETF did not admit that there was such a thing as NAT, and so the IETF did not standardize anything. And so what happened is you had lots of vendors that went off and built things that the IETF didn't admit, and they did it in lots of different ways. And then finally, one day, the IETF got around to saying, there's a problem here. And it showed a bunch of pictures similar to Warren's slides about all the problems here. And so then the IETF decided, gee, maybe we should go off and create a working group. And that working group did a bunch of work to document what the common practice was, in order to make the to say, here's the least harmful way of doing things, given that we know that you're going to do it. Right? And then the IETF pretty much finished that, and then it went on to create, saying, well, now we need a mechanism. Can you go back a slide or two to the things? Yeah, there. We now need some mechanisms to say, now that we have that, we'd like to have mechanisms to say, discover the status of these devices and discover the time remaining of these devices. And so we created a working group to do that. And that's kind of where the script ends so far. Okay. The rest of the script is, of course, that would get implemented too. But the point is that we had people from both the vendors of those middle boxes and the people from the OSs working together, because the problems that were mentioned are problems that we actually have a common interest in solving, right? And so how do we get them to work together? Well, those problems that you showed in your, gee, I got to a blank screen, right? That doesn't help the users of the operating system, and it doesn't get the captive portal people paid, right? And so neither of us want that, right? And so I think we've done this once before in the NAT case, and I hope we can follow a similar script here and make progress, because I think we have common interests. And I would love to get to a case where, from the operating system side, where we can get the captive people paid and get the users on there and not have all the problems, because what you described before, and I completely agree with your slides, this is a problem that needs to be solved. We've done it once before in the NAT case, and I hope we can do it something similar. And I happen to have noticed that out of the people raising their hands in the implementations, a lot of those are the same people that were involved in the previous script that I mentioned.
And sort of following up from that, one of the things I think we need to be careful to avoid is saying captive portals are bad. For a while, the IETF kept saying NATs are bad. That did not really aid the sort of dialogue.
They can be used badly, but...
Speaking of which, Christian Ritema from Microsoft, and I am working actually with the team doing this kind of stuff. There's one issue that I'd like to point out, which is the inherent contradiction between the desire for eyeballs and security.
Yeah.
When you say, hey, eyeballs are important, that means that you want that message in front of a full-fledged browser, presumably with a nice flash video of the beer flowing on your bar and things like that. And that's exactly what you would find in a phishing web page that tries to deposit a virus in your computer. And so I wish that in whatever charter we have that particular security request well stated.
Lorenzo Colletti. Dave, I don't know if the analogy with NAT actually quite matches, because I think that in some of the use cases here, there's a conflict of interest. In many of the cases, you say there are common interests, right? But in some cases where you say, well, we only want you to be able, we only want you to be able to reach Facebook for 2 minutes. But please don't tell your user that this is not actually a real internet connection. So they're going to try and go to Facebook. I mean, that's sort of, I think if you took users and you said, do you want this? Do you like this? They would probably say, no, I don't. And so I think, perhaps we won't be able to agree on everything, but hopefully there'll be enough common ground.
Right. To clarify, I don't necessarily disagree, right? If you look at how NAT started, there was lots of people doing, say, symmetric NATs that we said was evil, and maybe they said that they weren't, but we managed to find common ground to say there's a least harmful thing, because our overall common goal is to get paid, right? And to users pay when they're happy and they can get done what they want to do, and if we're all trying to work towards that goal of getting them paid. But right now they get into a place where they're stuck and they can't even pay. That's a bad thing, and I'm saying maybe there's some middle ground, just like we found middle ground in the NAT case. It may have started off saying, yes, some of those same issues may have come up, or equivalent issues may have come up initially. But the long-term goal was not to do that. The long-term goal was to get a good experience and get paid and so on on the captive portal.
It does bring up an interesting point, though, that, inevitably some of the discussion might cover what the quality of the thing you get once you get through the portal is. I know that sometimes people, in the research we did, people blocked the captive portal detection in the operating systems because it wasn't actually to get internet access. It was a closed network. or a partially closed network. And I think there's some interesting states there to explore.
Dan York. I was distracted from the point I got at here by the conversation that was just going on. So I guess I had two comments. One is that I think your point that you just made there, Mark, is important. There are different levels of access that captive portals really want, and some want to, of course, put a lot of things in the way for you to have to go through before you can get there. The other piece is, if we look at, we at the IETF are great at creating protocols. We're less great at getting those actually out there deployed. And while that keeps some of us employed, that's not really what we want to see. We want to see these things out there. I guess my question would be, I love seeing that we have people here who are involved with this, but I also recall some of the same conversations there. And I guess a question I would say is, do we have any understanding of the industry, of the captive portal industry, and of the people who are the players in there? Do we? I mean, or are you saying no? No. I guess here's my point. If we look at how well RTC Web, or WebRTC, or RTC Web, WebRTC, whichever one in which to call it, all of those things. Yes, exactly. If we look at that, I mean, a large part of the success that has happened with that is because we've had two of the largest players in that space, very actively involved in implementing it as it goes along. So I guess to your last point about getting vendor involvement, I guess I would ask the question to all of us here is, are there ones, that are doing this? Do a lot of the hotels seem to, when I go around to them, a lot of them seem to outsource their captive portals to, a certain subset of companies. And so I would throw out a question might be to see if we can identify some of those and see if we can get them involved with any effort we come up with.
Right. I agree with your concern there very much, especially because my understanding is the actual captive portal side of things, there are thousands of vendors. The operating system vendors are a more narrow funnel, and that may be an interesting control point.
So one thing to sort of follow on from that, one of the folk who works at Google also works on apparently the largest open source captive portal implementation, which then gets baked into, a bunch of home CPE and gets used in a bunch of small deployments of captive portals. And so we at least have that person who is interested in participating.
Okay. Dan Harkins. I know you don't want us to say captive portals are bad, but I think captive portals are bad. And well, our company has one, but I don't actually work on it. But they are bad. And I think they're bad because they seem to, they give an attack vector of an open web page that is rarely patched, and it's just an invitation for bad things to happen. And they promote some of the worst user behavior. Christian touched on that, but also the habit of clicking the idiot box that says trust this untrusted certificate. And if captive portals are trying to be elusive and get around operating systems that are trying to work with them, then maybe we could just declare war, and these operating systems could put something like IP over DNS into their product, or make it easy to change MAC addresses and basically just steal their service, and then they'll go away.
Andrew Sullivan. I'm not going to express an opinion about captive portals, good or evil, but I'm listening to this and I'm having a hard time understanding what a successful effort would look like, because I heard, for instance, well, there's some people with conflicts of interest and they might not participate in this, and like if we're going to stomp out all stupid captive portals everywhere, I'm pretty sure we can go home. So there's got to be somewhere short of that we want. So what is it that we're trying to do here? There's several efforts. They haven't apparently been successful. So maybe the success is, I mean, I'm just speculating here now. Maybe the success is, well, we find out what it is that people don't like about the stuff that we've already tried, and then come up with something better than that. Or maybe it's that we come up with something that is more attractive to who is the user here? Is it the company that's deploying the captive portal? Is it the vendors of these things? I mean, I'm really struggling with how we proceed to find out about that. I don't have better suggestions than this, however, so I would like this to get better, but maybe we need to narrow that down.
Eric Pasquale. So I do think we're going to need to hear from some people who make these things. I'm hoping people like that are behind me. But I think Dave had a good point here. If we can find some things that are bad for the users and bad for the captive portal vendors, like people who operate them, and maybe that's a place to start. And I think there are a couple of obvious places to start, don't block, don't intercept TLS connections, and don't intercept things that are on port 80. And those aren't doing anybody any good. They're irritating to the user. It's not like when the guy connects on port 20 on SMTP or IMAP, you're gonna stuff messages down his mail queue that says why don't you log into my captive portal? So I mean, you're just screwing, or instead of calendar entries, I mean, you're just screwing up his connection. So I'm saying block. I'm saying don't make the mobile, block them, right? I think anything that has the property that we're trying to make the user get stuff for free that the otherwise wouldn't get isn't going to work out. But if we could just stop annoying him, that would be of some real value. And maybe that's a place to start where that would actually be on everybody's radar.
Hi.
Ever interrupt? Two comments from the Jabber. First from Ted Levin. I think success looks like explaining what needs to be done to make a captive portal that we think is secure and implementable, and whatever supporting docs are required to make it work. I think bad actor captive portal implementers are out of scope. Second one is from Michael Richardson. Success for me is having a taxonomy of captive portal techniques, a security considerations for each method. That would be enough for now, because if that's as far as we get, then we can apply Dan Harkin's method.
Hi, Dave Dolson. Who likes free Wi-Fi? Okay, you wonder why these companies provide free Wi-Fi, right? There's some quid pro quo here, right? There's maybe Starbucks is to get you to come to Starbucks. Maybe they don't really have an incentive to put you in front of a portal. And also, I don't think it's constructive to talk about the quality of what's presented to you, because we don't try to make rules about whether people should be allowed to have bad websites or good websites. There's really bad websites out there that are full of advertising and full of useless information. We don't try to legislate that they shouldn't exist, right? So I don't think it's useful to talk about the quality of the pages or the length of the video or how many ads there are or anything like that. I think we have to recognize that, okay, you want some free Wi-Fi, watch this. If you don't want to watch this, you don't get the Wi-Fi. That seems to be a fair trade-off. So, and success, by the way, as someone who's got a product that can, redirect what requests. Trying not to have to guess about what the operating system's doing to detect whether they're trying to get a portal or not, and trying not to, if it was, this is what the operating system is going to do, and this is what you do if you want to tell the operating system that there's a portal, I think that would be really useful.
Alex Roscoe. I think two things I think would be interesting to define success. I think one is the RA implementation, putting a URL in the router advertisement. And second, I think that the next, I guess, captive portal implementation is going to be Hotspot 2.0. And no matter which way you look at it, you still have to log in somehow and provide credentials to get the configuration. I think if we can maybe define a user experience for that could work in a captive portal state, that's user-friendly and kind of explains what's going on with the operating system and how it's being managed, I think would be an interesting path to go.
So let me insert myself with you. What I had thought of would work out nicely for success is I arrive somewhere and I arrive with my phone. And the network tells my phone, you're behind a captive portal. And then, potentially, the phone has a standardized UI provided by my sort of phone vendor that looks the same across all places. And it provides me a little menu that says this much for this, you know.
And it fits on your screen.
And it fits on my screen and is localized to the language that my phone is in because, you know, it knows all of that stuff. And I choose what I would like and I click go and it says, would you like to pay for this with Apple Pay? And I click yes, and then I have internet access and it works fine for an hour. And 5 minutes before that expires, it says, would you like to pay again? I understand that that only fits in some set of captive portal desires, you know, those who would like money in exchange for your time. It does not solve the ones who sort of would like eyeballs. So it only fits a certain set of use cases. But that was my sort of, I arrive, I click a button, I get internet, I give them some money, life goes on. And that was sort of my ideal outcome. And now there's a really long line, so I should shut up.
Yeah, sorry. Clement Schumper. I have two comments here. One, we should not only think about payment methods. It has become a legal problem in many countries that even if you're totally willing to provide free internet to everyone who comes by, for some legal reason you have to instruct them first not to do anything bad and to agree to these terms. So there's something that we need to consider there as well, besides payment. And the second thing is, I think when you're asking about how can we get this deployed, we're facing the usual thing of network side says, why should we implement it? There is no devices doing that. Device guy says, why should we implement it? There's no network that does that. When I look around in this room, I see like people responsible for about shy of 100% of mobile network devices. If we all agree on a useful standard for that gets implemented on at least two of those platforms, I'm not going to name them, then we would probably have enough market pressure there for portal providers to actually use that facility. I'm thinking of the thing that Apple did with Passport, where at first everybody's like, yeah, but this is special, and having tickets and cinema tickets and flight tickets. Now, because of the sheer market pressure of Apple, many providers have implemented that. That we could discuss if that's a good thing from a religious standpoint, but I think that worked.
This is Alex Battersku. With respect to the why portal makers are there, making money was one reason cited, advertising eyeballs. I think there is much more to that. Okay, that's not the only reasons. Okay, they should be cited, but it's not the only reason. Sometimes the portal makers want to make sure they have in front of them a person that is responsibly using the internet, and just click on something. I accept the conditions of usage. So sometimes they just want your age so that they have statistics on the age of the people who use the internet in that particular place. And which brings in a privacy question that could be solved at a regulatory level. I mean, this is probably little appreciated to be said here in this context, but sometimes with the privacy of cookies, this was a problem that was solved at legislation level. Now you have in Europe all these websites that are mandated to tell you this site uses cookies, so you must agree on them. If the legislation also mandates these captive portals to tell the users that you are behind the captive portal, then that could also be a solution that comes from upper legislation and from IETF. And finally, my comment with respect to the user interface, whether that user interface is a standard user interface for several operating systems, it still requires the end user to fill in forms. And this is something that may be acceptable and may be successful for some devices like laptops, like PDAs. It is not acceptable for devices that don't have user interfaces. And I name, in particular, I name vehicles on this, but there are more than just vehicles. You have many devices that want to connect to these captive portals and that want to be easily accessing the internet, even though they accept the conditions of usage. So automated, it was somewhere in the first slides, the automated allow automation of this. And there are already, you have not cited the open source efforts trying to do this automated connection through captive portals, okay? In France, you have 3 operators, mobile network operators, and you have open source implementations that automate through these particular operators' captive portals. Okay. The operators are happy, but the effort comes from the open source community.
Do a quick interrupt. Has everyone seen the blue sheets? Does anyone need a blue sheet? Okay. So move the blue sheets that way. Yeah. Okay.
So, Tim Chan, I would just say, in terms of getting access to Wi-Fi, my experience of Prague is you go around to bars and you buy a beer and you get a pre-shared key. It seems like a fair deal to me. I haven't seen a captive portal in Prague yet. So. I'd just like to say, again, from the Eduroam background, is that at universities we have Eduroam. It spans dozens of countries and zillions of users. It's something that's evolved over the years. It's built around the 82.1x at the edge, plus the radius hierarchy in the middle. We used to have captive portals at the edge, but those have essentially been banned. Having said that, as the system's evolved, at the universities, if we have guests who are not from an Eduroam site, we do typically in university run something like the cloud or another captive portal service for our guests. So this is actually very important to us as well at universities. We're not ignoring this because you have Eduroam. I think that's an important thing. And I think the Eduroam community would be very interested in helping in this because we've evolved certain practices and so on, common standards for the types of services and protocols you're guaranteed to get to once you've authenticated onto Eduroam, that type of thing. So I think that's helpful. The other thing that is obvious then is that you probably have at least 2 SSIDs. I think one of the things to note is when you are in a place, you've got to pick between all those SSIDs. It would be kind of nice if this was built with it in mind that your device could talk to all those SSIDs and essentially broker for you the best internet connection you can get, rather than just you having to select them one by one and discovering what's behind there. So maybe thinking about that might be interesting to do.
So I just want to make one comment, not specific to that, but in general, is that listening to the comments so far, I'm hearing lots of requirements being brought to the table, and it's already a very complex area that hits many parts of the stack. One of my concerns is that if we try and make this the all singing, all dancing captive portal mechanism, we very well may fail. And so I think one of the things I'd like to hear discussed is, you know, do we do small things that are remedial and just try and either document what's current practice and maybe, you know, hit the 80% use case or even the 60% use case versus doing the whole enchilada. We have someone at the back mic. Should we go to the back mic?
I'm not gonna, I don't want to interrupt the mic lines. Could you just go back to the what's the problem slide?
What is the problem?
While you guys continue to talk.
That's probably a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thiru, Cisco. Captive portal problem is also relevant to enterprise firewalls, where we have seen various cases where enterprise firewalls do use captive portals to enforce identity-based policies. So it's not just a problem for airports or coffee shops, but we have seen this problem even in various enterprise networks where firewalls and policy enforcement devices want to get to know the identity of the user and enforce appropriate policies on firewalls. So this is a common use case that we have seen.
Dorothy Stanley, HP Aruba Networks. A couple of comments. So I was heavily involved in the Wi-Fi Alliance Hotspot 2.0 work. And I think there are several people here who were. And so when you described your theoretical perfect outcome of having a simple UI that could be on any phone or any device that would be kind of standardized, just to let you know, that was considered early in the discussions of what Hotspot O should be and what problem are we trying to solve. And it was basically not possible because of the different demand. I mean, certainly it's possible to do, but it was just not an acceptable solution to work on the variety of platforms that would need to be on and the different goals of captive portal users and providers, that they wanted information from people. They wanted to give customized information about the venue. They wanted you to see something when it came up. And to try and come up with what would satisfy them all, it just wasn't possible. So it's a data point for you. the second point is, if you go back to your couple slides down, what do we want to do? So the first main bullet is a way to talk to the captive portal, and then your second main bullet is automated logins. And I think I see a disconnect between the two. One is making the current broken captive portals better, and the other is going to automated logins, which really Hotspot 2.0, Passpoint, EduRoam, using 802.1x with EAT methods kind of gets you to. So I think you need to decide which one you want to do. And I would put up a vote for how can we advance progress of automated logins. You know, EduRoam is a great example. I'm not saying that this emphasis is going to totally get rid of captive portals. There are times when you still need to use them, or you know they're out there. But are there ways to actually further minimize the use of captive portals and move more to automated logins? You know, there is some progress in deploying Hotspot 2.0 in operator environments, but it's taken a while to roll out, as you know, operators, of course, are very slow in deploying things. But once, you know, you can get faster or more convenient automated logins using, this is probably not the right word, but federated credentials. We're using maybe your Facebook credential, you know, Google credential, whatever. You know, people are starting to look at how to do that. And so to make the automated logins come sooner rather than later, I think if this group is formed, should be a focus.
Okay. So I'm relaying for a couple of people. Dan York, relaying for Ted, who says, Ted Lemon, yes, who says, I don't think we want to compete with EduRoam. I want the CP in the local hospital to work right. Automated logins are for big operator networks, not small CP setups. And earlier he also said, well, no, I guess it's sort of combined into that one. Okay, so that was Ted's comment there. I guess I would, taking off the jabber hat, on my own sake, I think to the points that have been said about, I think we have to recognize captive portals are here. We're, you know, as much as many of us would like to jump on the, you know, just do something else and they won't do it, they're going to do it. You know, captive portals are here, and Warren, as much as you may have that nice picture things, I agree with the speaker who was here before, but the other part is a lot of those captive portals have a focus around marketing, and that's what they want. And so they don't want to give a standardized view. They want to give a view that is unique to their place, that has their pictures and their things, and they want to capture all your data. So they don't want automated logins because they want to get your stuff so that they can go and start sending you email newsletters about their cats videos or whatever they want to do. So I mean, that's their point, is to get that data from you in many of the commercial ones. Now, I wanted to make the point that Tim made and others made too, that there are a lot of benign, I mean, good uses. You know, corporate guest networks, a lot of other places where there are good uses of captive portals. So we have to be careful in the language that we're using on that. I think, though, the person who was sitting up here said, if we've got a significant number of people here from both sides who want to participate in this, there certainly is. If we can come to an agreeable solution that can be deployed by folks, and to your point, Mark, not at the big giant thing. We've got to come up with what is the smallest set of solutions that goes and solves some of this problem, makes an easy user experience for those of us who are out there traveling around and dealing with these things all the time. That, to me, is what success looks like. We can come up with something that can be implemented and deployed that solves the necessary subset.
Hands up if you still need the blue sheet. Okay, still the big pocket kind of in the middle there. Where's the other blue sheet? Okay, it's traveling. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Lorenzo Colletti. So I kind of like free Wi-Fi, but what I like is internet access. So one of the things that really irritates me about all this stuff is that I have a perfectly working LTE connection, right? I want to use your captive portal, I really do. But while I'm signing in, I don't want all of my stuff to stop working. I don't want my voice call to stop working. I don't want all of this, such that when I come back within range of Starbucks, my phone says, hey, gee,
this is an open internet network. I'm going to drop your phone call, isolate you from your email, and cut you off from the internet. You know, and I think that's the reason why a lot of operating systems have these checks. And so hopefully we can find a common ground there. Another point I wanted to make, and so rant over, another point I wanted to make is to agree with a lot of the earlier comments. I think captive portal is too generic a term. It's not too generic. It's not useful. I think, echoing an earlier comment, we do need a taxonomy of this stuff, because some of them are really pay for my time. The other ones are agree to my terms and conditions. The other ones are just a poor man's replacement for 802.1x. I think in order to make progress, we should, yeah, that's right. We need to, well, sort of, yeah. We need a taxonomy. I think, find out what people are using this to do, and mostly, you know, one example that really threw me a little bit is that my boss, right? He opens a bug saying my phone is on cellular data Y, and it turns out that his router had turned into a captive portal because it's the AT&T router. When its DSL connection goes down, starts doing SSL intercept, saying, oh, you know, like you know, click on this warning. When you get past that, I'm going to tell you that your internet connection is down. Gee, isn't that helpful, right? So I think the lesson there is twofold. First, people are doing this because they want to get messages to the user, and this is the only way that works. So I don't know if we can do better on that. Perhaps we can't, because HTML is very rich, and so maybe we can't do better on that. And another is, again, we need to figure out what people are doing this for.
Just a time check. We have, I think, a half an hour or a bit less left, and I want to leave at least, 15, 20 minutes to wrap up. And so please be brief, and we might close the queues pretty soon. Okay.
I'm Murray Kucheravi, and so far the discussion that I'm hearing has a lot of UI type words to it, and we're not very good at that here. I think that's basically the thrust of my comment, is this feels like it sits somewhere above where our usual purview, and I'm worried that we might be diving into some place where we might do more harm than good.
Thank you for your brevity. Carlos?
Carlos, there is something that already exists and looks very, very familiar to Warren's definition of success, and it's called Skype Wi-Fi. Have you ever used it? It looks really, really similar to your description of success.
Tobias Gondrom. Thinking about what would success look like for the working group or for whatever we do. I see four base scenarios: money, eyeballs, legislation and regulations, or simple authentication. So these are the four scenarios. Actually, I would settle for the benign, the friendly ones, which would be legislation and authentication. So if we could already solve that, I think for them it would also be beneficial to have something like that, because they would have to implement less. They could probably buy something out of the box. You may discuss whether the other bits are useful or not, but if we could solve these two, I think that would already be advantageous.
Morgan Zach at Xenovet Networks. I want to speak towards the presentation of the content when you encounter one of these things. I, again, would agree that it's not useful to limit what can be displayed. A lot of these smaller devices have less than fully featured browsers that help to handle the HTML interaction. Presumably they do that to help in the security area, because you don't know if you can trust the network that you've just attached to. However, as a portal creator, sometimes I want to have access to those features to make that user experience better. So what I would like to see is some discussion in how to implement that and provide the trust and the security that's desired.
Don't go. So how would you feel about a sort of API option something where you can say, all I would like is I would like to ask the user for them to click an OK button or enter their name and email address. And then another option, which is, and I would instead like a more fully featured browser, with a separate cookie store, etc. Would it be useful to have those couple of options like that?
Yes, I do think so. However, in the particular use cases that I'm thinking of, I'm not necessarily asking for credentials, a EULA, anything like that. I'm directing them to an application.
I think we should close the queues.
Stefan Winter. I think there are basically two types of captive portals, some which require you paying with money. That's, I think, a problem we can solve because this works halfway automatically. And there are those who want to pay you with your attention span. And I think if we try to solve those, we are bound to fail just because we don't know why they want the attention span, how much they want, if they want a YouTube app or whatever. So if you go down the route of providing numerous options, how much do you really want from the user? I think we are chasing a long tail, and we have hundreds of things to consider at some point. What might this portal want from the user? I wouldn't want to manage that kind of API.
Ted Hardy, I want to go back to something that was pointed out earlier in terms of the amount of information that is kind of leaking accidentally here. And I think one of the concerns that I have is that while this captive portal interaction is going on, you have the network in this funny state, and all sorts of other applications may continue to try and use the network. And as a result of that, you're kind of leaking information about what the user cares about. And I think that ties in kind of a very funny way to what Lorenzo was talking about, in that what he would really like is there to be a recognized network state of attached but not connected to the internet, which is present when you're connected to an app, to a captive portal, similar to the way you can say I'm attached to an AP, but there's no internet connectivity. And if all the working group did, from my perspective, was get us to a point where we could present that to the operating system, so that there was a recognized network state that says you're connected only to an authentication service and nothing else, so that no other applications tried to use it, and so that when it's connecting to the application service, if it's privacy sensitive, and I would encourage everybody to be, it uses a separate instantiation like an incognito mode, so it's not leaking cookies or other information about the data that's not necessarily salient to the captive portal user and certainly couldn't be passed on. It's kind of bad enough that in a lot of these cases, what the request is being passed to the user is for much more privacy sensitive information than the user realizes. It would be really nice if we could stop the leakage of all of the other privacy sensitive information that isn't even necessarily inherent in the clicking the Facebook like.
Dave Crocker. So I heard statements that this is a complicated space and that there's lots of variation in what people do and how they do it. And I heard a suggestion that we should think about which things we can carve off and which ones we shouldn't. I like that a lot. I suggest that a starting effort should be to characterize this space with an informational document, and I say a document, I don't care what the details of how it's produced, whether it's one or more, that will depend on what makes sense. But characterize the space in a way that gets people going, yes, I see that, and I like this piece, or I like that piece, but gets some coherence among people both inside the IETF and outside. I heard a challenge on the term captive portal, and yet people seem to be using it very comfortably. If indeed that's the term, then that's the term, and whether we like it or not. If it's not the term, if there isn't real comfort with it, then yes, finding a single term would be really helpful. The second is that having, besides characterizing the space, characterizing the things one might do, and in brief, pointed ways. So Warren goes, would you like an API that did? That was perfect. It was pointed, it was clear, and it was small. Whether in fact we do that, separate issue. But in fact, having the document point out a range of things that might be done. The thing that you asked for, which caused me to step up, was when you were saying complicated and we could try to boil the ocean, should we do that? There's a hierarchy of things we can do, and getting a sense of what's the low-hanging fruit we can do easily and would be useful, and we think we know who will implement it they don't have to commit, but we think we know. That'd be a place to start. And the rest of the stuff would be characterized but not pursued until maybe later.
Philip Wonder. Some people were worried about connecting to a captive portal and then their secrets leaking out or other stuff. I don't understand that concept. You connect to an untrusted Wi-Fi network. When you go through the portal, then you send your data there and you worry about stuff leaking out. You're going to send it anyhow when you are logged in. So I don't consider that an issue. I mean, use more encryption if you're worried about it. But the thing that we do really need is a standardized signal from the portal to the operating system to say, you're behind the captive portal. And currently that signal is not there, so they redirect HTTP and HTTPS and whatnot. And I mean, that's a protocol that we just don't have, so we can't blame them for not using it. There's a second point, is that what most captive portals have in common, and say the 8021X is separate in that case, is they want to interact with the user. And I don't care how they want to interact, whether they want a credit card or you to watch advertisements or whatnot. And we have a perfectly standard way of interacting with users, and that's HTML. So if we just find a way to fraud the portal to say, hey, you are behind the captive portal, you need to fire up a browser, then operating systems can just do that and alert the user, well, this is the browser session for your captive portal, and well, now you have to do something to gain access. And I think then we have a way of structuring the problem that we can make for.
Sorry, the keys are closed.
Mike Bishop, Microsoft. So I will echo some of the previous comments. I do like the idea of moving toward kind of an informational overview of what problems are out there, what techniques are currently in use. I can speak to a couple of them briefly. In Windows 8, I owned how we detect captive portals in Windows. I don't anymore. As part of that, I was also briefly in the Wi-Fi Alliance Hotspot 2.0 group. So I can talk to some of that, but the previous comment that we should have an OS concept of a state when you're behind the captive portal, but you don't actually have internet access. We have that, and captive portals intentionally defeat that.
And I know Apple has that as well.
Yeah, I think all the OSs do. And the way we do it, we have in the OS a hard-coded URL. We go out and try to reach that URL, and we know what content is there. If we cannot reach the URL, we don't have internet access. If we reach the URL and the content is anything other than what's hard-coded and we know to expect, we assume it's captive portal and pop a browser. What? No. There are things you could do to improve that. For one thing, it really ought to be TLS, and it's not. But at any rate, you run into a lot of captive portals where that one URL is allowed through. Or rather, the 3 URLs for Microsoft, Apple, and Google. But I think as we move forward, we do just want to get an overview of what do the operating systems do, what do the captive portals do and why, and what other techniques are out there and what are the gaps. The biggest gap that I'm aware of that we in the IETF could define and fix is when you have a TLS connection, there's no alert defined to say, I am not the person you're trying to connect to, please stop trying.
Martin.
Yeah, so Martin Thompson. I'm hearing a lot of criticisms leveled at captive portals here, but I'd also like to level a couple of the operating system vendors. A lot of the natural posture that we've had here, and a lot of the discussions, this seems implicit in that, is that we want to treat the stuff that's coming from the captive portal as poisonous crap. And so what you see is the browser that's popped up, if it is indeed popped up, is highly sandboxed. It's limited in capabilities. It doesn't have access to any of the user's current state, context, cookies, etc. And this is a position that I think is actually harmful for getting the outcomes that we want to get from this work, because it means that the captive portals have an incentive to try to defeat that detection mechanism. Because what they really want is they want you to get your browser open with your Facebook login, right? And so they actively try to avoid whatever it is that the operating system's doing. Now, that's not to say that Ted's concerns are not valid. I think we need to be aware of the presence of the captive portal so that we don't do things like open up IMAP connections and get all sorts of rubbish happening. And we don't want to be connecting to secure sites and have certificate override dialogues coming up and all those sorts of other things. So there's a number of concerns there that I think but ultimately, I don't see any problem with us opening the browsers, a full browser, the user's regular browser. We build browsers so that they can handle all sorts of poisonous shit coming from the internet. I mean, that's kind of rule number one for the browser sandbox, right? Whatever rubbish is thrown at you, don't die. So I don't think this is. I think this is probably something we could do.
We have 15 minutes, and we need to come to some indication of what to do next for our kind AD. If Lorenzo, if it's very short, please do, because then it's less distracting.
Speaking for the Android implementation, that's not technically possible, because when we detect a captive portal, it's placed in the background until the user logs in, because I don't want the Hangouts, TCP connection, everything else to go over the captive portal, right? So the user wants internet to flow, and the browser is not technically capable of opening up a window on a different network. I mean, no such browser exists. Now, there is an API for doing that. If a browser wanted to implement it, it could. But Chrome doesn't implement it. Firefox doesn't implement it, I think. And so what we're left with is the system application, which knows how to log in, which knows how to operate on this background network, but it doesn't have your Facebook credentials. So I don't know about the Apple. Same for Apples. So if Chrome implements the MIF API, which it can, like we have an API for this, but it doesn't.
Okay. So this has been an interesting discussion. I wanted to add one piece of anecdotal evidence on my part, which is I travel a lot, and I've noticed in the last year or two, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, people aren't using captive portals anymore. I think people are being driven away from deploying them because they're such a bad user experience. I personally do not want whatever happens here to stop that trend. Because I live in a country where we don't have the need for legal terms and conditions in most cases. Australia. So we heard a number of opinions about how to move forward. It seemed like there was a certain amount of sympathy for starting by documenting what the current problems and problems involved with and use cases of captive portals are. And that seems like a reasonable first step to me. Should we start some light humming, perhaps? So who thinks that it is an interesting work item for a potential IETF working group to document use cases and problems of and problems with captive portals? If you think that is an interesting work item, please hum now. And I will ask, if you do think that that's not an interesting work item, please hum now. Okay. Jebber?
Yeah, Michael Richardson says, on the topic of taxonomy, that's how Behave ultimately worked out.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last bit.
That's how Behave worked out.
Okay. Yeah, taxonomy would undoubtedly be part of that, I think. Of the people who, I'm from my perspective, I think that there are a lot of people with opinions about captive portals, but the people who work with them, either consuming them or producing them, have a much greater depth of knowledge about what's going on there. Of the people who put their hands up as an implementer before, who would be willing to contribute to such an effort? Could we see the hands again? Okay, so about the same number of hands-ish, which is good. So we have people willing to contribute in some fashion, and I characterize that as a fairly strong interest in that sort of work. Then the next question is it worth trying to do something more than that to start with? And I'll ask again to hum, who supports a more aggressive schedule? In other words, working on technical deliverables of some sort. I don't think we can go into the details of what that would look like, but who has an interest in that? Now.
Clarification question?
Sure.
Technical details that don't depend on taxonomy?
Some technical mechanism.
Like something really obvious, like don't put invalid certs, or?
I think, so the informational stuff that would probably encompass basic best practice as well.
I would say at this point, think about one Boolean. Are you behind captive portal? Yes, no. That's, for the beginning, it's perfectly enough.
But is that a protocol or an API?
Well, I can see the ACP option.
Aaron.
Yeah, to me it seems like there's at least two shades of this that you could talk about. One is make recommendations on existing technologies and how they might be used to address the interests of the various stakeholders, and the other is whether there's interest in developing new mechanisms. And for what it's worth, my feeling is that we don't know enough about it to say that the latter is a good idea.
And actually, just to follow on from the last comment, there is actually a draft which is with the IESG or something, I can't remember the exact state, where DHCP will tell you that you are behind a captive portal. You don't actually know when you've satisfied it, but at least you're told, there is a captive portal here and where it lives, so you can go talk to it.
And of the implementers who put their hands up earlier, who was aware of and interested in that? Right, okay.
Darn.
Either.
It's not. I would like to ask one question in addition. Would there be interest? Maybe it's too early, but would there be interest in arranging for Plugfest? So if we have implementers of the portal side
it's
and
too
the
early.
website here,
I think it's too early for that.
Yeah.
Because we don't even know what you're plugging. Yeah. So I just want to finish the hum there real quick. As long as it's not controversial that we include best practices in that first bucket that we hummed on. Technical mechanisms. Who thinks it's too early to talk about technical mechanisms? Hum now, please. Okay, that's a stronger hum than the interest one, I think.
I think people were a little confused by the interest one because I had no idea what you were on about.
Okay. Sorry, which one?
All of
them.
No,
they still hummed.
Can we work on technical things? I think people
are confused. And I think Aaron put it fairly well. We have a bucket of, exploring the current space, possible best practices, in terms of avoid this, and what problems are caused by captive portals. That's the kind of documentation bucket. And then there's the new new protocol mechanisms that we could deliver. That is something cut from whole cloth.
So I should point out we can't stop people from writing drafts.
Of
so if
course
anybody,
not.
sure, but if anybody's interested in writing drafts, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. So, yeah.
I might disagree with that, but okay. Christian.
Yeah, one thing I would like to see in a charter is a study of security considerations. The problem I have is that, yes, we will do something for captive portals, and we have a technology out there that does some advertising of stuff to users. There's a high potential for such technology to be misused by people purposely putting up stuff that is not even a captive portal or not even designed to give you free Wi-Fi. It's just designed to mimic a captive portal and hack your computer. And if there was a way to tell between the two, that we realized, if there was at least a way to study all that space and have it out there, would be very nice too.
I'm going to interrupt here. The folks in the queue, if you're continuing the discussion about captive portals, we have 5 minutes left. And so this really needs to be about next steps.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Proxying a comment from Michael Richardson again. The fastest we can go is to not finish the protocol work before we finish the taxonomy. See no reason to limit when we start work if we have the energy available.
And Tim Chang, I'm sure everyone's familiar with RFC 5434, which talks about the criteria for a BOF, and the third one's quite useful here. I think the scope of the problem is well defined and understood. People generally understand what the working group will work on and what it won't work on and what the actual deliverables will be. So sort of hand wavy saying people can write stuff and it'll be okay. I think we need to make very clear what is in scope and what isn't, and that the whole room understands that.
Martin.
Yeah, Martin Thompson. I see this and I get very worried from about step 3 and in the milestones here.
Yep.
And I think there is something that we could potentially do that is significantly tighter in scope than that, but we haven't gotten even close to that in this discussion today.
And I'm worried that a lot, a good portion of us, including myself, don't fully understand the problem space and are, guessing based on anecdotal evidence rather than deep knowledge. And I think one of the questions that we should face is to publish these informational documents, if that's a direction that's interesting. It does seem like there's some implemented interest. Is a working group necessary for that?
Not knowing stuff has never stopped us having an opinion before.
But is it a useful opinion?
So, Dan York, I agree with the comment that's been here about scope. I think is critical as far as what we're looking at in terms of what we're talking about. The other point is Dan Wing dropped a link into the Jabber chat to a wiki that was created after the last BOF that does have, in a quick look of it, a whole bunch of information that has been already captured. So it may be something we want to at least make more available to people so they know it's out there and look at expanding or adding to, et cetera.
Is that the one on the HTTP working group GitHub?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's actually been in existence for quite some time before the last BOF.
Okay. But it's good. Looks like on a quick look, it looks like it could be useful. I don't know.
Real quick, Dan.
Dan Drutza. Just a clarification for the first phase of the scope that was hummed positively. I think Mike Bishop pointed out a very important point, why they're doing. So when we document use cases, it's not just, okay, this is what it is. We need to understand what the captive portal requirements are, and then, you can move to a meta model, intent-based meta model using the taxonomy. So you actually give permissions according to the needs, and it's controlled in a very, very it's managed in a very controlled environment because you got a limited number of operating systems. So if the intent is presented, the operating system can offer, but you got to give all the things that they need because otherwise they're going to circumvent it. So thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Barry, do you need any more information at this point? Having 3 minutes left.
I think I don't. I think this went better than I expected it to. I think we had good discussion. I think we have more interest than I was expecting us to have. And more interest from the right people. So I'm happy.
I think there are a lot of questions to still be answered.
There are. We're not ready to charter this tomorrow, but
okay.
I think I think we are ready to keep going.
So to me, maybe the biggest thing we can capture right now is we had implementers expressing some level of interest, and how do we keep that in place if we decide to do something? So if of those people who raised their hands, are you all on the Captive Portals mailing list? If you are not, please figure out how to get on it, talk to us, or look at hopefully the materials for the BOF. But please get on that mailing list because that is going to be the obvious place where this discussion will continue. Yeah. Yes, you have to give up your personal information
and agree to the AUP, which is,
we should have a captive mailing list for this, I think, yeah. Okay, I think we're done. Thank you all very much.
Blue sheet. So we have the blue sheets. Did anybody not sign the blue sheet? Please come and sign the blue sheet.
A note for implementers: if you want to exchange cards or at least give links to your specifications, how you detect portals, or if you implement the portal, what you expect to do from us, from operating systems, try to squeeze at some place, let's say at the podium, so we can see and wave at each other.